it was turned really serious and I stabbed somebody 9 times.
I've never seen anyone on space have a good trip.
It's like methadone, but it's got a blocker in it as well.
How do you deal with somebody who's in a state of psychosis so bad that they're attempting to eat their own arm? So today I'm kind of interested in just sort of what we're trying to find out really is that sort of first 24 hours. What happens to somebody, you know, they get sentenced, they get remanded, whatever it might be. Really interested in that sort of, because I very much think, you know, that it's the fear of the unknown that kind of sets people off. And I think you must see that sort of in your professions and also as a customer, shall we say, that people's attitudes are very much informed by what they've been informed by. So if somebody arrives scared and fearful of the unknown, then obviously they're going to be a bit more difficult to deal with. Would you say that was...
Yeah, definitely.
That was accurate?
Yeah, I think it kind of starts from the court. I mean, if you've been coming to prison before, it's a walk in the park, but you can generally tell the first time has gone,
Yeah, absolutely.
To be fair, I
think you can tell them a mile off, can't you?
You get sent from the court, you come into prison, you're in the sweatbox, and then the reception process starts.
Yeah.
And obviously, there's a lot of lads didn't expect a sentence, so that keeps the pressure on.
Yeah, of course.
And I don't know about you, but I always found the reception process quite dehumanising, and it can be for the first time.
Right.
You know, you're basically stripped of all your stuff, any valuables gets put in your stored property.
Yeah.
You know, you're given a number, you're given prison clothes, you're strip searched. It can be quite a dehumanising process.
Completely different
Certainly
experience.
first timers.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I think as well they get asked the same questions quite a lot from all the different services they
All
see down there. So it can be any thoughts of self-harm, but they'll have been asked that about 4 different times by 4 different people.
Yeah.
So I think it can be.
I wasn't thinking of it originally, but now I am.
Yeah.
I'm absolutely
Exactly. Yeah.
So Gary, you've got a different sort of perspective as I was just going to say, a customer. But first of all, I just want to have a little sort of a delve back and find out what went on, how it all sort of started for you. So how old would you say you were when you first had your first brush with the law?
8 years of age.
Yeah.
Just hanging with older people, you know, older guys, and trying to kind of fit in.
Yeah.
And I got caught stealing a bag full of copper.
Right.
So that was the first brush. And then it went from there, really.
So what were you going to do with the copper then?
Well, I'm not quite sure, you know. It was hardly the Great Train Robbery, but I'd probably wait in at the local scrapyard and you know, get a couple of quid.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that would have been the idea.
And so when you're 8 years old, I mean, you mustn't... I mean, what were you thinking? Like, what goes through your mind as an 8-year-old? Anything? Is it all to do with peers and impressing people?
I think certainly that was. It was kind of, you know, for a dare, really. That's how I think things began.
Yeah.
And then obviously, you know, as I've said many times before, the onset of the miners' strike, then stealing became necessity for me.
Right.
And my peers at the time.
All right,
so fuel and food and stuff.
So the community you were in was very much a sort of a mining community?
Just outside of Durham City, yeah.
All right, yeah. Oh, there you go. So I'm going to assume then that the first time you went inside you were on remand, is that right? Or would you have been sentenced? Or?
Yeah, I was. I got remanded when I was 15. I was involved in a fight with some other people and stuff, and it was turned really serious, and I stabbed somebody 9 times.
Wow.
In that fight.
Yeah.
So obviously I was remanded into custody for that for Section 18.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So where were you? Where were you then?
At Lone Newton Remand Centre, which is now, which was a young person's remand centre.
Yeah.
And that now is a female remand centre just outside of Durham City.
Got you.
So yeah.
So talk us through it then. So do you go in front of a judge before you get remanded?
Well, obviously we were on the run. You know, Durham's most wanted for a while. We were on the run for a good few months, and obviously still breaking the law to stay at large. And then we were caught, taken to the police station, and then brought up to the magistrate's court and remanded into custody. So yeah.
So tell us how that feels then. I mean, obviously you were 15 and full of yourself, so you know you might have a very different opinion of it now than you did then. But at that moment when the judge says, "I'm remanding you," you're not getting bail, I'm remanding you in custody. What goes through your head?
Well, it was a number of things. I'm reminded of what William Blake said when he said, "The fox condemns the trap and not himself." You know, I felt, you know, aggrieved actually that someone would send me to prison,
right?
Despite the fact that I'd, you know, done this awful thing to someone. And then because there was a group of us, there was this kind of false kind of camaraderie and a bit of a badge of honour.
Yeah.
But really underneath that, you're going into the unknown. So there's an anxiety and a fear.
Yeah.
And a projection of, trying to be tough about it all. And, no one's going to mess with me. And all of these things that you think when you're 15 at the time, going into custody.
Yeah. I mean, I find it hard to get my head around that, though, at the age of 15 years old, because I mean, most of us were up to no good of some description at the age of 15 years old. But I mean, that's pretty serious bother that you got yourself into there.
Yeah, well, I was involved with some older guys. We were running around with guns and all sorts of, crazy stuff at the time. And I think you're in that little bubble in that culture. So that was the conversation, breaking the law. That was that was the rules. That was your ethics. That was where your moral compass was. So going to prison seemed a kind of natural progression.
Yeah.
A bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, I think.
Yeah. Kind of like a hazard of the job.
Yeah, this is, occupational hazard, exactly right.
Today's episode is brought to you in association with Practice Plus Group, providing quality healthcare in secure settings.
So you get remanded. Where do you go next? Do you go into a holding cell, did you? Or
we went back down in the cells and stuff, and obviously we're causing mayhem and ripping the toilets out and smashing the cells up and all,
right.
And inviting the police for a fight and all these things because, I felt aggrieved. That's how I fought.
So were you all together in the holding cell?
In different cells, in the magistrates' court at the time, and then obviously placed in restraints and handcuffs and stuff, and put in the back of a van and taken to Low Newton.
So you get to Low Newton. What happens then? Do you sit in the van for a while, or did you go straight in?
Well, we went in one at a time into reception and stuff, and obviously we were met with a kind of, we were, you put really quickly within your place say, you are here, we are the boss, this is what's happening, and if you step out of line, this is what's going to happen. And, trying to get on top of you mentally and psychologically break you down within reception, that's how it certainly felt at the time, strip searched and all the rest of it, so...
That's, I mean, I don't want to hone in on that, but strip search, that's quite a...
Yeah, so obviously they're looking for any kind of illegal items, contraband, anything, anything you would be smuggling in. But it's a bizarre thing when a man says to you kind of squat and he's looking, inside the crevice of your bum. That was a first. So, and then, you're in prison.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, absolutely necessary, but probably the worst thing you could do to someone if you want them to be sort of compliant when you arrive and say, take all your clothes off and stand in front of us and do this and do that.
I mean, you quickly understand it can go one or two ways. You either do it or you start fighting and then, you're going to get overpowered and took to the block.
So what happens after that then? Did you, so when was this? What year would this be? Without giving your age away,
Yeah, that's fine. It was 1990. It was October of 1990.
Yeah.
I had a wonderful summer of love with LSD and some wonderful universal realizations, and then it ended in Low Newton.
So how had you saw the year planning out really before that? I mean,
it was a bit of it was kind of, I was involved in ram raiding and stuff, so we kind of saw ourselves as, in the romance of it all, as some kind of, outlaw bandit guys who, robbed for a good time, and, it was an endless party, but then obviously the hangover was a custodial sentence.
Yeah, because of course, I mean, I can remember, Rosie, I'm assuming you're not old enough to remember the glorious days of ram raiding, but it was like a sort of a Robin Hood thing, wasn't it? That seemed to be the...
Well, I often say, Chris, that I felt like I was Robin Hood, but in fact I was robbing everyone, and that's exactly what it was like, so, but we did have and it was celebrated in some part. I mean, the community was a hard-working community and a really lovely community where people looked out for each other. I think after the miners' strike, that did fracture, but people who I knew would buy stuff from you.
Yeah.
They would celebrate you and they would actually help you to avoid capture from the police.
Yeah.
So not everyone in the community, certainly not, because they're good, upstanding people, but some people would say good on you, and kind of your self-esteem came from there, and that's who you were.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's odd, isn't it? I mean, because when I was a kid, Friday night was when the shoplifters came around just before tea. Shoplifters come around, had stuff with them. If they didn't have what you want, put a little order in. Be here on Wednesday next week, and that's just that was just normal in my childhood. And we weren't like we weren't an outlaw family or anything like that, living on the edge. Excuse me, we weren't particularly different than anybody else in the area, but that was the economy of the time. That's how it was.
Definitely.
So So you're in. You get to reception. Did you see your nurse? Did you get a chance to have a sort of a health assessment?
Yeah, it was a nurse at the time, and obviously really brief kind of questions. Are you okay? Are you suicidal? You know, do you need a paracetamol? That kind of thing. Really, because it's it's just a conveyor belt, really, isn't it? You know, well, it certainly was then.
Yeah.
And then obviously through reception, given what at the time you had to wear prison issue clothes, which were brown if you were unconvicted and blue if you were convicted.
So is that for the prison officers to identify who was convicted and who wasn't, or was it
you'd know who they were?
You would know who they were anyway.
Yeah. So if you'd went not guilty, obviously you were still, you know, until you were found guilty or not, you were unconvicted, but you were remanded into custody.
So I'm interested in that. See, because I don't know about this. So I'm interested in this notion that you would be dressed differently whether convicted or not, and what the purpose of that is. Would you get different treatment if you were remanded but not convicted? Would you have like different rights and stuff?
Yeah.
You got a few more privileges, don't you? Like
yeah.
I mean, now you can actually, if you they let them all wear their own clothes now.
Yeah.
But back in the day when Gary was around, if you were unconvicted, you were classed as innocent. So you got more phone calls. You could spend more money. You got more visits.
Yeah.
So you got a few more privileges because you were technically innocent.
It's interesting. Now, is that? I suppose the flip side of that is that all of the well-established folk in there can spot who's a bit brand new.
Yeah. I mean, and I really knew nothing of prison. Like I say, I was from that hard-working community. Very rarely did anybody go to prison. So, you know, we didn't know the rules. So, of course, as soon as you land, people were trying to bully you and, you know, but we knew how to fight. We knew how to be violent. And that went a long way. Trying to take your food from you, you know, literally anything. And, so really quickly I had to fight. And, of course...
Right. That
you
brings more trouble.
You're setting your stall out, and that brings trouble with the officers as well. So
Rosie, is it like that now? Are they dressed differently, convicted or not?
That's quite interesting actually, because I didn't know that. No, people can wear their own clothes. If they don't have their own clothes, they go into grey, just like a grey tracksuit that you see on TV.
That's your standard dress, but they can wear their own clothes, as in what?
There's
Levi's
rules.
And trainers, or they can come in their own grey tracksuit?
I think there's rules, and like you can't wear certain brands and things like that, or you can't wear trainers with laces in and things like that.
Yeah, for safety reasons, I would imagine. Yeah.
The only difference, I think, is if there were a prisoner was an escape risk, you get put in like a
patches.
Yeah, it's like a brightly coloured.
It's yellow and green, and it's just like.
So you'd be seen going over the wall. Literally, is it like high-vis vest for the escapee?
I feel a bit sorry for people really when they get to wear that, because it's so visible. Everybody knows that you are an escape risk kind of thing.
And Catties as well, they wear them, don't
they? Do they? I don't know that.
I suppose then, in that case, that may be a badge of honour for some people.
It is.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, when I was away, they used to move you every day in case you were trying to dig out. If you were it's an escapee, that's obviously in there, and moved different cells and kind of ghosted during the night and kept busy because obviously you tried to escape and being caught or apprehended after you've escaped.
When you say ghosted during the night, explain what that means for anybody who might not understand.
Well, let you explain that.
Come to them like, no, lad, just shove you on the van and you're gone.
Just moved. No warning. No pack your stuff up. Where you going tomorrow?
Just kick your door in the morning. Yep. Pack your kit. You're going.
So that is what's that like a tactic to disorient people and disrupt organisation and stuff like that?
Well, one, if they don't know they're going, you can't plan an escape, can you?
So I got you. Yeah.
That's the thinking behind that.
Yeah, of course. Oh, that's interesting, isn't it? So you've been through reception. How long after you arrive do you actually get put in the cell that you're going to be staying in?
It all depends how many new arrivals has come and how busy it is, and then people are kind of, you're given a cell and you'd go to a cell, and at the time you went in the cell, there was no toilets or anything. It was just a bucket in the corner and with a guy who you'd never met on a bunk bed, and that was what it was like going in the cell. And so. And
at any point, like in this process, still, I know you're still, you're 15, you're still full of yourself. Is that moment when you walk into a cell with a stranger and there's a bucket of basically crap in the corner? Is that even a moment where you go, oh no, what have I done?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's lots of those moments, isn't there? But again, I think having that mentality at the time and being on remand and pretty much knowing deep down that you've finished and that you're going to get a guilty, you do hope against all hope that a miracle's going to occur and that you'll be back in the community as quickly as possible. And again, being back in the community only meant being back involved in that life and robbing more and stuff like that. That's where the aspirations were. That's what they were.
Yeah. So you walk in the cell. Can you remember who? I mean, without naming names, unless of course you have great friends and they wouldn't mind. Can you remember who it was and what they were like?
There was a guy from Sunderland called Joe Connelly who won't mind us mentioning his name, I'm sure. And he was all right. He was just a young guy himself, a young up-and-coming fighter from Sunderland at the time. And we got on really well. And I got on well with most of my pad mates. I once had a devil worshipper who I didn't particularly get on with, and I had to reject him from the cell.
That'd be quite difficult to sort of negotiate way around a devil worshipper.
He was drawing pentagrams on the floor with a talc, so I had to throw his stuff onto the land and get rid of him. So that's the only one I ever got on with, really.
Right.
Yeah.
So Tom, is there any kind of like, I mean, obviously, Tom, how long is it since you worked in the prisons?
I left in February this year.
Left in February this year, so literally weeks ago. Yeah. Oh wow! So, is there any kind of process where cellies are matched up? Because obviously, that could be quite a bit of that could be a big issue if you put the wrong kind of person. I mean, if you put a racist in with somebody who's not white, or
that's all considered. I mean, when you first go onto the wing now, we've got like a first night centre. Yeah, and it's really where you address their immediate needs, if there are any addiction issues, any mental health issues.
All right.
Mental health nurse, and you do. You know, a lot of lads that come in with their mates, so you try and pad them up together. But I certainly, somebody I wouldn't put in an addict with somebody who's trying to go clean.
Got you, yeah.
So as best.
All right, so down to that sort of detail now, is it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, so is that like an individual thing? So like, there's not like a policy and a checklist that you're following at that point?
Yeah, there is a process you go through. You've got to check, and obviously, if he's got racist markers, you're not going to put him with an ethnic.
Yeah.
For obvious reasons.
Yeah, absolutely.
Same, I mean, some are homophobic.
Yeah.
So, but a lot of them use the system, to be fair, like, because if you want a single pad, claim to be a racist, claim to be homophobic, and you get a single damper, because the risk's too great.
Right, so let's get this right. So, like, sort of a menu ordering system. If you go in and you tick all of the wrong boxes, you'll get yourself a nice,
they know how to play
cushy number.
Yeah, basically.
And I don't suppose there's any way you could.
No.
Because I mean, you'd be incredibly liable, wouldn't you? If you think, I don't believe you, and you put them in somewhere and something goes wrong, you're in big trouble.
Yeah, and you're not going to take that risk, are you?
No.
So, yeah, if you want a single damper, you just play the system.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you were saying, Tom, that there's like what was it? How did you describe it? Like a first sort of...
first night centre. It's just where their immediate needs are met. They can stay there. Normally at Durham, I don't know what yours is. Normally it's a couple of days stay, so we can assess them, get their needs. I mean, some lads are coming in and the family don't know that they're locked up, and there's all that sort of stuff. Yeah. They've got dogs locked in the flat. Yeah. And just sort out any issues they've got, really. Some lads, they can stay there 2 weeks. And again, I don't know, it's probably the same at Leeds. It's population pressure.
Yeah.
Some things they stay on there 100%. Longer than they have to. Certainly, like we've got a sex offenders wing, and really want them off the main line. Yeah. The vulnerable prisoners wing as quickly as possible, because of population you can't always do that, which causes issues. Obviously. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. So is that a relatively recent thing, Tom, or has it always been like that?
It's been done for quite a while.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, when Gary was first in the game, it wasn't that thorough, to be fair.
Right. It was just like, look at the draw.
Get your bags, you're in there, son.
So, I mean, sort of historically, any cantankerous cell parents going on?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, you could come in for poll tax, or you could come in for, murder. Driving whilst banned, and you could be in with a murderer.
Yeah. Got you.
Who, I've been in with a lot of people who had really terrible mental health issues. And obviously it's a long night, and it's a long week, and a long month. Sometimes you don't want to... And fights in cells as well, obviously, lots of fights.
Right.
Over the years. Yeah.
It's interesting. I mean, I'm trying to get my head around this notion. Obviously, as I've never been remanded or sentenced. I'm just trying to get my head around this notion of sort of, see, I don't like sharing a room with somebody if I'm away on a gig or something like that, and you get doubled up. I'm like, I can't bear it. I can't stand sleeping in the same room as somebody else. Yeah. How do you cope with that?
Well, I just think, there's only a few ways out of that situation. I think you've got to cope with it. You've just got to get on with it. And for me, again, I understood that I broke the law, that I was in prison, and that it was, in my mind, meant to be difficult. Because I'm thinking, right, well, this is the path you've chosen, and here you are. Welcome to prison type of thing. But, now, the very thought of that fills us with fear, and going into a cell with anyone, or I work in the prisons now, and I often, you took us back to my old cell, in fact, didn't you? The last one I was ever in when I was looking at life.
You were both working in the...
Well, there's a story behind how we met under different circumstances, didn't we, some years later.
Got you.
About 7 years ago, he came back in to do some work, some rehabilitation work, and at the time I thought, unfortunately, I got dumped with him. Because he couldn't have keys, could he? So I had to babysit him. While he was coming and doing all this work, but that's a separate story. That
We'll touch on that one later on. Yeah. So, all right, Rosie. So, tell us what you do.
So, I've just recently, last year, done my prescribing. So I'm now doing the reception process when patients come in and they're needing their any medication really, but we're looking mainly at if they're withdrawing and starting on their methadone and substitutions for opiates. Or alcohol. Alcohol's really big at the moment, so we're making sure that everyone's safe and sorted, because it's a dangerous very dangerous, isn't it? And we also do the reception process. So like Gary said, we're asking all the questions, but they are very they can be very straightforward, quick to the point questions. It is because it is so busy, we don't always get that much of a chance to get to know somebody in that sense. It's,
so like from day to day, you could have how many in a day do you think sometimes?
We usually sort of 20 to top 40. 40 is probably the most we'd get in one day, and it's in the afternoon. But we have people coming in at all hours, so up until like 12 o'clock at night, people can still end up coming in somehow. So it is busy.
So what were you doing before this then? So I'm interested to find out what it is that makes you go, do you know what? I'd like to be a nurse in a really dangerous place. do you know what I mean? What happens there? So what were you doing before you took up nursing, or is nursing something you've always done?
So I've always been a nurse, but I used to work in A&E. So I used to, I worked there for about 4 or 5 years. And I loved the sort of fast-paced side of it. But I realised that I had an interest in sort of addiction, mental health, when patients are coming into A&E.
You had an interest in addiction?
Yeah.
Because I heard an interesting addiction.
Maybe
they asked you to leave.
I actually left that job. An interest in patients that were coming in back into A&E again and again.
Right.
Either accompanied by the police or going out. And just in some really bad states.
Seeing the same faces time and time again because the core issue wasn't being addressed.
Yeah, exactly. And I always did have an interest in prison nursing. But
so where does that come from? Where does the interest in prison nursing come from?
I love anything a bit different, I think. I don't like the usual sort of day-to-day routine of, say, working on a ward where you get up and sort of give the patients the meds. I love things a bit more interesting, really. And I work well with chaos.
Brilliant.
So, so I think that attracted to me.
My entire professional life is chaos, so I can absolutely understand that. So take us back to... work, prisoners arrive, they go through that sort of reception process first that Tom was talking about?
So they come in, they speak to an officer first of all. Again, it's about the cells, asking the questions, are you racist, homophobic, as well if they've took a padmate hostage or anything like that.
In the past?
Past, and that'll get them a single cell. They get put back into the holding cell, and then we will go through our process, which is sort of doing the bloodborne viruses, so checking their Hep C, HIV status, and then the reception screening process, where we ask basic past history, really. It is brief. We're trying to make it better. It's having the time to actually
the volume.
It's the volume and having the time.
You can't put more hours in the day.
No, exactly, and it's patients are coming in more complex as well, so they've got more needs that need to be met, and it's a place where we need to make it safe for them, referring them to the right places if they've got mental health needs, making sure that we're getting them into the correct care. We do have a complex, it used to be our first night centre, but it's a complex case centre, if you like, where vulnerable patients can go there if we're worried about them. So that's something we've put in.
So you're talking about questions including, have you ever taken a cellmate hostage? Surely, Tom, you can put their name on a computer and it'll say, oh, he's well known for taking cellmates hostage.
I would expect that to be on the markers.
Yeah. But you got to ask anyway, just
But
to
again,
just to
that's
cover
not
yourself
just-
from a legal basis.
It's
Yeah.
something you can miss when you're really, really busy.
I've got you.
I think the reception part, it's just get them through the first night. Keep them safe for the first night. Once they get onto the first night centre, it's a little bit more thorough, and that's when you sort out the wheat from the chaff.
Oh, that's interesting.
It is pretty thorough, to be fair, but like you say, it's 12 o'clock at night, and these lads they might have been up in front of the judge 10 o'clock in the morning.
Got you.
They just want to get to their beds.
Yeah, yeah.
You've got to make sure they're safe and they're in the right cell. Like.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all right, they present in front of you. What's the first question you ask?
It's a weird one, but have you ever been homeless? Is one of the first questions we ask in the past year. We also ask if they're remanded, sentenced, or how long they're going to be with us, because that can have an impact on what care they're going to be able to get while they're with us.
So is that if somebody has been homeless, does that have like ramifications for what health problems they may now have? Is that what that question is about?
Yeah, it could be. Also, so we can support people on release, so it triggers something on our system, so that hopefully we can start out helping people.
Yeah, so they don't just go out and offend again in order to get a roof over their head.
Yeah, ideally that's how it should be. I know that we do sometimes release people homeless, which is not good at all. But it's interesting.
So, what sort of problems do you predominantly see presented there? I mean, what is it? I mean, 'cause I'm assuming everybody's mustard keen to talk to you, with you being like not part of the system, the first person they've probably seen in days who isn't, like a figure of authority. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean you're not a screw. You're not the judge. You're not a policeman.
We get people either desperate to talk to us, they really want to talk to us, they need to get the methadone sorted, they need to get the medication sorted, there's a lot of different things we can help people with. And also, like you said, it's a person that isn't to do with the prison side of it. So we can be seen as sort of the safe space to actually say. So you guys might have asked them any self-harm, but they might have not been comfortable when there's a cell behind them full of other prisoners saying what's going on. So that's the first place we can actually get, they can say something that they might need to be telling us. But addiction is definitely the most we see, and mental health. So people in mental health crisis.
Massive.
So to talk us through that then? So the mental health issues, how do they present? I mean, what are we talking about here? We're talking about sort of depression, suicidal ideation, that sort of thing, or?
So I think it's when people are not speaking about the mental health is quite worrying. If people are, sort of psychotic, or they're not saying they're going to harm themselves, usually we find that that's when we need to be worried. If they're really quiet, not engaging and things like that, then it is more concerning. A lot of people that are going to then hurt themselves aren't going to tell you about it. So we have sort of the ACT process, where it's sort of like a suicide documentation.
Talk us through that then. What's the ACT process?
So it's a big book, and if we are worried about someone, if they are going to hurt themselves, then we can essentially open this book, and it alerts the prison side and the healthcare side, so they get watched, say, 4 times every hour through the night to make sure that they're not actually hurting themselves. It can be a bit of a pain for everybody, because obviously it adds a lot of work and pressure. And sometimes we're saying, we're opening an ACT, and it's like, oh God, but it's just to keep someone safe, really. And it makes, and then they get reviewed by the mental health team the next day. So any support that they need could be put in place then.
So how often do you feel vulnerable? How often do you not feel safe in there?
Not often, really. I actually felt more unsafe in an A&E department. On a night shift at 3 a.m. There's no one there if something does go wrong. But we are like I'm sure you're the same, like a really good team. Like the officers do look after us, and often like prisoners, they're not angry at nurses. They're very respectful to nurses, and they know that we're trying to help them. We are sort of seen as, I don't know, would you agree, like a separate side, like not to do with the prison. And they know that they're our priority. We're not there for the prison side of it. So yeah, I think I don't feel that unsafe.
Yeah.
There is a few
Well,
times.
that's good.
Yeah, there is
yeah,
a few times where I think, oh, this is a bit dodgy.
Yeah.
But not very often.
I think most times I've seen nurses get grief is when they won't give them a medication they think they're entitled to.
Yeah, 100%. And a lot of the time, if we haven't got confirmation that someone's on a certain medication, especially one that's like an addictive medication, a controlled drug or whatever, and we can't confirm they're on it, it would be so unsafe for us to just pop someone on that medication.
Yeah.
But essentially, they could be withdrawing from that. So there's two sides to it. But it is about medication. A lot of the time it is about medication.
So what's it, like, just as a little side note, what sort of systems are in place to ensure that that medication doesn't become a currency?
That's the biggest problem that is the hardest thing, and that's what we're trying to sort out every single day.
Yeah.
It is, and it's a lot of medications are swapped for other medications. There's diverting.
Yeah.
We get patients ask us to put us on a certain medication because it is worth a lot, in the prison. So we have to try and balance it up, because obviously people are entitled to their medication at the same time, and it's just about understanding, I think, as well. Like if you just say no, you're not getting it.
I suppose the dilemma for you is as a nurse, as a health professional, you can get a bit of an ear and an eye for who's pulling your string.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of responsibility if you deny somebody a medication that they may have actually needed.
Yeah. There's
How do you manage with that?
The responsibility? I don't know. I actually don't know.
Normally the medication that's popular within the prison, it's not issued in possession. It's normally issued daily. And they're supposed to go to a hatch, take the medication, then you're supposed to check the mouth, lift the tongue.
Yeah.
Doesn't always happen.
Yeah.
And that's how it's like the methadone. Like methadone's a liquid, and it's normally for heroin. It's a heroin substitute. They'll not swallow it and then spit it back into a cup and sell it. It's big currency, like.
Yeah.
We have a lot of people on they'll be on Espinol when they go out. They're
What
in
is
the community.
Espinol?
So that it's like methadone, but it's got a blocker in it as well. So if someone did take heroin, they wouldn't necessarily feel the effects.
Oh, I've got you,
heroin.
Oh, that's
and
interesting.
I've
I've never heard of that
really
before.
good drug, and it's really, in the community, it's works really well for addiction, but in the prison it's a massive currency, and it's so hard to manage people not diverting it. It's so we don't necessarily keep people on that medication.
Got you, yeah.
But again, it's balancing it, because if it's helped somebody and essentially saved their life, but it also poses so many risks as well in the prison. So it's just finding that balance and making it fair as well.
I mean, we're talking a lot about what might go wrong, what the problems might be, but it sounds like somebody's going to be pretty well looked after when they get in. Would that be fair to say?
I think so, yeah. I do think that we try our best to look after people. I think, again, the problems of volume of people, things getting missed that shouldn't be missed. But when somebody is in crisis, we do, I think, work really well at helping people.
It's incredibly difficult work as well. And on the other side of that, if you don't get the medication you feel you need, and if you do really need it, then it's straight to the black market, which perpetuates a cycle of violence and bullying, and and all that kind of.
And debt as well.
Yeah, well, once you can't pay your bills, then that's when the violence happens, isn't it? So it's a two-way kind of. It's a very, very difficult work. I admire you for doing it. It's difficult.
For me, the biggest thing. I mean, I've always said Durham has not got a drug problem. You can get absolutely anything you want.
Right.
And that is the truth. I would imagine Leeds exactly the same.
It is,
You'll pay over the odds for it, but you can get just about anything. And that's the issue. Like with that comes violence. If you get into debt, you're going to get whacked. Like,
I suppose it's really interesting from an outside point of view to see that it's basically life and the world condensed into that small place. So it's like it's got its own economy and own societal structure and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you deal with that? I mean, so let me hypothetically, Gary, what would have stopped you being able to get your hands on whatever you wanted, or maybe not misbehaving in prison? What would have done it? What would have done the trick?
When it comes down to illicit substances, nothing could have stopped it. I mean, the security in the offices and everyone involved at the prison does the level best to stop the flow of drugs and stuff, but it's really, really difficult, as we know, that there's a massive drug problem in prison, and it's always been a problem. Obviously, with the addition, we were just talking this morning about the addition of the MDT tests and stuff.
What's an MDT test?
Well, it kind of getting your urine tested for drugs and stuff. And that changed the nature of drug taking in jail, because before that, there was a lot of cannabis and stuff. Cannabis stays in your system longer.
All right, yeah.
So obviously people started using opiates and stuff within the prison, when all of this first came into effect.
Yeah.
And then you had a lot of heroin addiction and stuff. People getting out of jail with a heroin addiction, couldn't feed the addiction, breaking the law and straight back in.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a universe of kind of...
I think prescription drugs as well.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
That's a massive thing at the minute.
When I was aware, the prescription drugs weren't as... I mean, there was Temgesics and stuff, very...
What's
Valium.
What's a
Well, it was a Temi, and it was an opiate, synthetic opiate, to the best of my recollection. So there was a problem with them, but I think, again, a microcosm of what's happening in the community. There's a lot more, I think, prescription drug problems within the communities. That certainly, presents within the prison as well.
Yeah, if it's happening in the community, then
yeah, absolutely. Even down to what we were saying about respect.
Yeah,
you can what you see in the community, you will see within the prisons as well.
So, tickling the conversation towards a slightly more positive outlook for somebody who's just arrived in prison. If somebody genuinely wants to get clean, genuinely wants to use their time wisely within the system, what services are available for them, Rosie?
So I think it's the best place to get clean in some ways.
Right.
To be honest, that you're not in the out, that you're not around the people that you use with. So there is so much support if you want to get clean. We have a drugs and alcohol service that are really, I'm sure you guys, the DARS team, they're so good. They'll go and review patients.
What's the acronym stand for? Drug,
alcohol.
Rehabilitation.
Yeah, I've got it. Something like that. Let's not make it up if we don't know. So they're going to say the darts team, but that's not.
Yeah. So at the minute we're doing some work on putting people on the Buvidal injection, which is really really good. It's an injection that lasts a month. So instead of having to go to the pharmacy to get your methadone or your Espinol, it just slowly releases in your system.
Yeah.
Over a month?
Yeah, over a month.
I mean, I don't want to drop you right in it, but can you describe to me how that actually works?
It just slowly releases into your system. So it's just slowly releasing, same as if you took a tablet on one day, and it lasts all through the 24 hours. It just lasts for a month.
I've seen people who are using that, who've been long time users, I've worked with for years, and it's a revelation. It really does work really well.
So I suppose that removes the risk of it becoming a currency as well, if it's a once a month injection.
Yeah, it does, and it's also has the blocking agent in as well. So if people are using it, doesn't work for everything, but opiates, they won't get that high from taking an opiate.
So it does have the blocker. It does have the blocking. Oh, that's interesting. Because I was going to ask that.
Yeah, and it's just one of those drugs that people are actually finding, like you say, have been using for years. Yeah. They finally get something, and we're actually doing it in prison. Is really positive, I think. I think it's something that'll work really well. It's just then on the community side of it, you have to make sure that their services are going to be able to continue it. So that's
Do you know if it's something that's available in the outside world, or is it?
Yeah, it is available. I think it's expensive, isn't it? I think. Right. But I think if there is funding for it,
definitely
in the community services.
I'm working with people in the community at the moment who attend different drug centres across County Durham, certainly, and it's being kind of prescribed that way. So and it's working really well.
Tom, if drugs completely disappeared from prison, what impact would that have on your job?
Firstly, it'll never happen.
Yeah.
As hard as we try, we do try.
Yeah.
I just think they'd find something else, like hooch. They'd just find something else to kill that time.
Yeah.
I think it is a time thing, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I think the drug
spice using time, it takes up
kind of
time.
Leave prison for a short while. They'd just find something else, I think.
Yeah.
Probably hooch.
Yeah, I mean, there's always been hooch.
Like, no, I don't want to ask that question. I was going to ask you, how does somebody brew? But I'm not going to ask that question because I don't want to give a list of instructions to somebody.
Really easy.
But it's happening all over.
It's really easy.
Well, I'll beep that out.
Smells bad.
I'll beep that out. We won't hear that because we don't give anybody the recipe.
Cements in plastic bags.
Yeah. Stop it.
It's
Keep going. He
vile.
won't stop, will he?
Yeah, it smells horrible.
It's awful.
Yeah.
I drink it.
Yeah.
I've drunk it lots of times. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they just find something else, Chris. I've
Yeah.
never really thought about that, to be fair.
Yeah. Because like, I suppose, like, so let's get a slightly more wide ranging here because drugs are a massive issue and just about everybody who falls under the foul side of the law has drugs in their life. Would that be fair to say?
Well, I'm going to say something contentious here, and I mean it.
Yeah.
I've got a pretty liberal view around cannabis.
Right.
In as much as, you can smell it a mile off. What I find with prisoners, it helps them sleep and it keeps them calm. It's not like the hallucinogenics and it's not like the spice. And if I was the governor, I'd put it on the canteen list.
Yeah.
I would,
Right.
Because
Put it in a cake.
It just has a settling effect. It's the other stuff where you get the violence and the,
Yeah.
But that said, I mean, where there's drugs, there's normally violence when they get into debt and stuff. But cannabis, for me, I'd legalise it in the country.
Okay. I'm just for a community service point of view, I'd also like to point out that perhaps somebody suffering from some mental illnesses wouldn't benefit from cannabis because it has been linked with sort of schizophrenia and other people as well. Yeah, and
it's use and abuse, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
definitely.
there's a whole other debate about triggering mental health issues and stuff like that. But I think from a prisoner perspective, in the early days, in the Stone Age, people using cannabis within the prison, it was a lot calmer. Yeah. But I think an escalation again of drug use within society, it certainly has boomed. I mean, and drugs within the jails were, going back in and working within the prisons. There's a lot more drugs in prison than I think there's ever been. And the addition of spice that you mentioned there, absolutely horrid.
Massive.
Yeah, absolutely horrible. So things have changed.
So spice is something that's never been on my radar in my life. Obviously, I'm maybe 50s now. When I was young, it just wasn't a thing.
No,
it wasn't a thing when I would have been maybe interested in experimentation and all that kind of stuff. So I'll ask each of you to tell me why you shouldn't take spice.
Oh, I'll go first. It can be mixed with absolutely anything. They put like rat poison, all sorts in it. They're putting fentanyl, I think, in it at the minute. It's just linked with deaths. It's linked with bad mental health. It's just the worst thing you could take, basically. You just don't know what you're getting, do you? You don't know what you're getting, and it's just really dangerous.
Yeah. Gary?
What she said, no. For me, I mean, seeing the damage that it does, and I've seen people eat their own arms.
What?
I was running a group, and I once said to a guy, it's a zombie drug because of the catatonic state that you're in. And I mean, you can die on any substance, can't you?
Absolutely. But
he went, it is the zombie drug, and he lifted his arm and he'd eaten his own arm to the bone on it. I spoke to 3 other people on that day who died in the showers. I think you had to resuscitate them actually as an officer.
Wow! So you spoke to 3 people who had died and been brought back to life as a result of spice.
One guy was tricked into using it. He was in for his driving offences.
Yeah,
he died. One guy was a long-term user who couldn't wait to use it again. I mean, I was just flabbergasted at that because he died. And the other guy just flirted with it a little bit, and he died also.
Gosh.
And I will say this, one guy cut his own penis off on it, and another guy was on camera. Tom took him to the block, and he was eating his own
excrement.
Yeah.
Jeez.
So
not being aware of it afterwards.
Yeah, they don't know.
It causes mayhem for me.
Yeah.
It's the biggest pain.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. You don't. I mean, the drugs in prison anyway. 9 times out of 10 they've been stamped on that many times. So you're getting rubbish anyway.
Yeah.
With spice, you just don't know what you're getting. And we've had to revive lads, and lads have died.
So Tom, how do you
still take it?
How do you deal with somebody who's in a state of psychosis so bad that they're attempting to eat their own arm?
You just try and restrain them.
But I mean, how? Because I mean, I can't get my head around it. I mean, this notion of on a daily basis, is this something you deal with on a daily basis?
I think I've told you the story. I was Oscar 1 kind of runs the daily run of the prison. I was Oscar 1 this day. And
So what's Oscar 1? What does that mean, just for people who don't know?
He kind of runs the daily operations, like making sure the workshops, the staff are where they should be, the prisoners.
So Oscar 1 is kind of like the
In charge.
the site foreman in
everything
prison.
comes through him.
Yeah,
on the
got
day.
you. Yeah.
Any incidents you've got to deal with.
Yeah.
And Spice was relatively new, and it was, I think I counted 12 on one shift, lads going over.
Yeah.
On
Wow,
Spice.
12
like,
people.
My head was coming off, like,
Goodness
just
me.
going over.
And then it's ambulances to the prisons and
Yeah.
Then
stuff.
there's ambulances, and then staff have to go with them.
Yeah.
So it just causes absolute mayhem. And like I say, I've seen lad died. We've had to resuscitate them.
Yeah.
I've never seen anyone on Spice have a good trip.
Mm-hmm.
And I say to the lads, like, I've never ever, in all the incidents I've seen, like the frothing at the mouth, they're having fits, they're having shaking, and they're just.
So what's there must be something, right? So is it simply just not being themselves for a few hours? Is that what it is? Because it doesn't sound like, it's not like, it's like the 90s. It's not like going to a rave and having a couple of happy pills and jumping around in the strobe for half an hour.
There doesn't look to be anything fun about it, looking at it, So, and I think it is taking yourself out of the situation, no matter what the consequence would be. But also it's addictive as well.
Right.
It's highly addictive. So I think.
And it's a synthetic drug, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of people say they use it to pass the time, which isn't
Like, wow.
Yeah.
I've never seen a good trip on
No,
that.
I've
ever.
not.
So if somebody wants to get off Spice, so you'll have people arrive in reception and they'll say, I've got a Spice addiction. Is that?
Not. It's more of a prison. I think it's more of a prison drug, really.
Right.
I don't think many people come in with a Spice addiction, really.
Yeah.
I think they say if they've been in prison before and they've gone out and then they've continued to use it.
Yeah.
But there's nothing we can really give as a substitute for Spice.
Right.
There's no medication unless, there's no substitution medically, so it's just working.
Spice was legal. You could go to the shop
Yeah.
and buy it.
Yeah, I do recall that, yeah.
And it came into prisons. Like, we started the urine testing.
Got you.
Spice didn't show up on it, so that's why people drifted to it, because it never showed up on the urine samples.
Oh, got you.
I think it was used a lot within homeless communities, and again, as a kind of
Just not being
physical
there.
and spiritual painkiller, isn't it? To get out of the situation. I think anyway.
I think it's like the last resort, maybe. It's like not what
cheap.
someone would, yeah.
Yeah, it was cheap.
So how long have you been? Sorry, is it 4 years that you've?
Yeah,
worked
4
there?
years,
So, what would you say has gotten worse in terms of the problems you see in that 4 years?
Definitely mental health, and just like I said, the complexity of patients, and people getting released a lot and having to sort of organise how they're going to be okay in the community. We're having a lot of people on, I know it's not a new thing, but on sort of hunger strikes or food refusals. But it's just managing that. Another thing is, say somebody is taking Spice, it's getting close to that patient. It's a safety thing, really. So if they were in A&E, it'd be us dealing with the patient, just us and the patient. Whereas there's a whole other side to it. The officers need to make sure that they're safe and we're safe, and the prisoner's safe. So you've got to add that to it.
Yeah.
And definitely prescription drugs and diverting prescription drugs has definitely got worse.
You've got to be careful about secondary kind of inhaling it, haven't you?
Yeah,
Many officers
there's
have
definitely
fits and
times.
stuff. You've seen
All right, so
Yeah.
it's that
people, the secondary
it's
kind
that
of-
potent. Literally,
Yeah.
you walk into somewhere where somebody's
Oh, yeah.
and you're done for. Gosh.
Yeah, you walk out of cell sometimes and you're a bit funny.
Yeah, we've had people had to go off.
Yeah.
Just walked into the cell, walked out.
Yeah.
Had an
They don't
episode,
feel it.
started crying for no reason.
Yeah.
Goodness me.
Yeah.
Strong stuff. What would you say, tickling us back towards a positive note, you've seen an improvement in the last 4 years?
I think our team's working together, so we've got a really good relationship. I think we've got a better relationship with the prison side, so we are all working towards the same goal, I think, and trying to make sure that people are safe and looked after.
Yeah.
But we have a good relationship with the officers' understanding of our role as well.
Yeah.
And again, sort of the first night process, making sure that we're working as a team to ensure that people are safe.
Yeah.
And we do a lot of sort of like MDTs with the prison side and the healthcare side, because I think it can be we can get frustrated at the prison side, and I'm sure that officers and the team get frustrated with us because we've got different,
slightly different objectives.
And I think it's just working towards the same goal, really.
How do you look after yourself? Because it sounds like a really, to me, who likes talking for a living.
Yeah,
that's basically
that's what I do as well.
That's about as difficult as my job gets. Yeah. How do you look after yourself?
I think it's having the support of like your colleagues and stuff like that. So we've got good like understanding, because nobody else is going to get it, like what you've gone through or what you've seen. And I think it's just making sure that we're looking after each other. And just going home and having a nice time with my dog, do you know what I mean? And just like making sure that I am trying to like keep a balance, because it can become your world. I know like when I first started, I was doing lots of overtime and things like that, because it's like another world, and you can get very...
It totally engulfs you, doesn't it?
Yeah,
I call it the people game within the prison and out in the community.
Yeah.
Helping people and being there for people can totally engulf you.
Can be your complete life, and I think it's just making sure you take a step back sometimes.
But the dog plays a big part in your mental health.
Yeah, definitely.
Give the dog a shout out.
Oh, well, she's not going to listen, I don't think.
Why not?
I don't think she'd be interested, but she's called Nala.
French Bulldog.
Yeah.
Is that a real dog?
We're not going to get onto that one. She's definitely the cutest dog.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Gary, what sort of support is available for people inside now? What do you see now that maybe wasn't around so much when you were in?
I mean, this would be a bone of contention for anyone lying in a cell who's, I've had no support. And, everyone's journey is different. So but for what I've seen, I mean, I can speak on behalf of myself. I've been arrested and put behind the door for some really serious crimes and served a couple of prison sentences, quite long term. Me being allowed even to go in and work with people and kind of to instill hope and ask them to use the time and not let the time use them and be there for them within the community. So I think that's a huge leap forward going into prisons. And there is some wonderful people working within prisons, officers, mental health professionals, education teachers. There is some people who were there and they really mean it and they want to affect positive change and support people through the sentence and out into the community. I know you mentioned housing and stuff there. So I've seen a huge change. When I first went into Durham, I was sitting in a cave on Air Wing with a bucket, and I thought, is this it for the next 4 years? And an officer who sadly died recently a year ago, Ronnie Cook, was supportive of me after our first couple of meetings. And the officers as well, long-term officers like Tom, I thought would be dead against anybody going in there with a criminal history.
Yeah.
But they couldn't. I was really supported and helped, and people are there. The ones who are there for the right reasons are wonderful people, because it is really difficult work.
Yeah, and I mean peer support. I mean you can't underestimate. You can't understate, how important peer support is, isn't it, in everything that you do?
Yeah, and I had lots of mentors when I was away, some not so positive, criminal mentors, obviously, it can be a university of crime, especially for a young person. But there was other people doing time who were really good to me and helped us through. And, lots of officers, gym kind of, the officers in the gym, education. I can remember nearly all the names, really, really supportive of me. But what they were trying to do with me at the time was they were, I guess, planting acorns, if you like, planting seeds that I didn't realise till many years later.
Right, yeah.
Till I wanted rehabilitation and I really wanted change, because it's easy to say it when you're in a captive audience, and it's easy to say when you're in a place you don't want to be that you want change. But if you really want it bad enough, and you do, everyone needs the kind of right support, it is there and it can be achieved. And I know that from personal experience.
So I'm going to ask each of us as an individual, what would your advice be to somebody to help get them through that first 24 hours, 2 days, maybe the first week inside? What advice would you give them, Tom?
Stay away from prison politics and stay off the drugs.
Gary?
Don't be afraid to reach out for help and ask for it. It's a very lonely place, or it can be. You don't have to be alone. Reach out and try and get some help, because whether that be from your peers or from the professionals working within the prison. And that it's not such a hopeless situation. The sun will rise and it'll set, and tomorrow's a new day.
Rosie?
Yeah, basically what you guys said, but definitely stay away from the drugs, spice, smoking other people's vapes, and like
Smoking other people's vapes?
Yeah, definitely.
So tell us about that.
Currency.
Yeah, so vapes are a big currency, aren't they, in prison?
Yeah.
There's a lot of arguments, a lot of even self-harm and things about over vapes.
Wow.
So definitely just make sure you stick to your own. There's spice in other
Borrow
people's
nothing
vapes.
and lend
Yeah,
nothing.
that's you've put it well. Yeah.
Borrow nothing and lend nothing.
Yeah.
That's very good advice.
Yeah.
And I've got one more quick question. How long after you've been remanded or sentenced will it be before somebody gets to see a family member as a visit? What would you? I mean, I know it might vary depending on the case, but I mean, what sort of time? That week.
Yeah.
All right, that's good.
You get a reception visit almost immediately.
All right, and so what would that be?
Basically,
Sort of.
It's online now. It never used to be.
Yeah.
Before, in the olden days, you used to send out the VO.
Yeah.
Now you can actually do it online.
Yeah.
So your family can book it.
Yeah.
The same day you're locked up.
All right, that's
And
brilliant.
you might not get it depending on how many are in the visits or, but immediately.
Oh, that's good. Oh, that's good news to know. So we're ending on a little positive there, but I think we've had a really good conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.